Good afternoon and welcome to chapter 13 of this series of classes, lectures on British popular culture since 1945. And today we're going to move on to something new. So I did a series of talks about the general historical background, and then I did some talks on the theories of popular culture, how to understand it. And then I did some talks on visual art in Britain since 1945. And now I'm moving on to cinema, British cinema and society since 1945. Now this brings up some new questions, if you like, because if the title of the entire lecture course was British popular culture since 1945, it's also been asking itself what is culture, what is popular culture, and what is British popular culture. And also, when you ask what something is, you're always running the risk that it doesn't actually exist. And so one of the questions which interests me is, does British popular culture exist? That is to say, popular culture produced in Britain, is it really British? Or is it these days, is it really just completely internationalized that no longer really has a national characteristic? And cinema it might be an interesting way to look at this. I'd also like to underline that different aspects of popular culture, street art, cinema, television, pop music, hip hop, they all have very specific ways of being produced and being consumed. And in particular, seen as money may or may not be the root of all evil, but it's certainly the nerf de la guerre, as they say in French, the center of a war effort. And so we need to look at cinema. And the first thing you realize when you look at cinema is that if you want to make a film, you need a lot of money. And if you want to make a film and distribute it to the cinemas around the place, running change of cinemas costs a lot of money. And so really, when you want to make a film which has some impact, then you're first of all faced with this question of where to get the money from, which is slightly different. If you're a street artist, yeah, you don't need that much money to go out and paint some stuff, perhaps make it popular on Facebook, perhaps become a famous millionaire, probably not. Similarly with pop music, if you can record some music and then get past the gatekeepers, get your song to some disc jockey who is influential, then you don't need to start with millions of pounds. But cinema's a little different, and that certainly affects the content of cinema very much so, because you cannot afford to make a film which will be loved by a few thousand people. It's not enough people. Okay, so let's have a look at all this then. I ought to say that cinema is not as central to cultural life in Britain as it is in France. When I walk around the university in Rouen, I hear students talking usually about Marx, but sometimes about other things, and cinema is very, very present. Now in Britain, it's certainly the case that cinema is considerably more expensive than in France, and I do not get the feeling that people talk about it as much. Nevertheless, Britain, for a small country, has been able to maintain a significant place within cinema. And there are a number of very interesting things about cinema. One is that in Britain, if you look at all the cinemas, all the films showing in Britain now, you'll find that there's a really solid domination of American films. Now, certainly British films will manage to get a little niche in there, a little chunk, a little space, but America is very, very dominant. After America and Britain, then there will be other Anglophone cinemas, but the market in Britain for subtitled films in other languages is very small. Unlike in France, where us French people, we've got used to the idea that we might well want to see films subtitled. The other thing is that this is quite a different situation from in the television, and this will be interesting to wonder why. If you take the top 25 films that were the most popular in Britain last year, a large number of them are American. But if you take the top 25 television programs, the vast majority are British. So there's obviously something going on there. As we look through British cinema since 1945, we do not, because we want to understand how it works, we do not want to only look at the best films. We also want to look at important films of lesser quality or less appreciated. Now, I'm sure you can all name some British films, and if I was in class, I would do, yeah, what British films can you name? But I'm not. And so what I'm going to do is I want to look at three genres of films, three types of films which are important in British cinema production, and then go through from the 1940s more or less chronologically. But first of all, I do have a graph here. Somewhere I do have a graph here, which is the number of films produced each year, and it goes right back to 1912. But if we look up to 2005 or so, I think, and you can see that we're looking at something which goes up and down, but it is generally between 50 and 200, very often around 100 films a year. So that's the sort of production we're talking about. So obviously far smaller than India, the biggest the producer of the biggest number of films in the world, and the United States, and no doubt also well behind Japan. So there we go. So types of films produced in Britain. Now, the importance of this is that if you're a British film producer, your first job is to find the money to make the film. Okay, and supposing you're not a famous British film producer, then you have to go and persuade people. It's always a risk. Many films make a loss. Many films make a loss. Yeah. So you need to persuade your investors that there's a good chance that your film will not make a loss, but which will make a profit. And one of the ways of doing this, one of the best ways of doing this, is saying, well, look, here are 5 films which were successful, which are somehow similar to my film, and therefore there's every chance to believe that my film will make a profit. Now, of course, your film should not appear to be identical to one of the other films, because you know that might lead to it becoming less popular. But certainly in a similar type. This is one of the reasons that sequels are a very frequent method. Yeah, if you do Superdog 1 and it sells 100 million tickets around the world, then obviously when you go along to see the investors and say, I'd like to make Superdog 2, then this is not going to be a problem for them. Now, how Britain does this, or how it's turned out, not deliberately, but accidentally, how Britain comes into this, is that there appear to be at least 3. But I want to talk about 3 genres of film which have come to be identified with Britain. And the first of them is the heritage film. The heritage film. Now, I'll be looking at in a moment for the reasons for the heritage film. But first of all, what is a heritage film? Well, a heritage film is something where what people see, whether they are British or abroad, very often abroad, that's very important. What people see is what they imagine is traditionally British. Very often bourgeois or aristocratic buildings, furniture, costumes, attitudes, manners. And that because Britain was for a tremendously long time, for more than a century, the biggest empire in the history of the world, then there's been left a sort of mystique and a sort of fascination for what it looked like. And this is why it can be extremely popular. You can sell a lot of tickets if you can present this in a film. I'm going to give you a few examples here. So Chariots of Fire is about a couple of it was brought out in 1981, and it was occasionally thought to be symbolic of the new Thatcherite England. That's not necessarily what the producers wanted, but that's one of the things about culture. What the producers want is not necessarily what happens in the head of the people receiving the product. So Chariots of Fire was about 2 Olympic runners and their life and their competition. They're competing in the Olympic Games back in the 20s or 30s. I'm pretty sure the 1920s or the 1930s. And when you see it, you see many shots of Cambridge in the 1930s, where gentlemen came to learn and even more important, to play sport and to have a good time. Yeah, and so it's this sort of image of this traditional Britain, which of course may or may not have existed, and this is certainly something which is very, very popular. Now, when I say that the heritage and the traditional decors and costumes and attitudes, you can imagine these 1930s Cambridge people, very, very, very politely, and you can. I remember at the beginning you can see the dons in their library, which is a bit like this one, but less drawn, drinking their sherry and saying, "Oh yes, I think he'll go far," yes, and so on, and looking very eccentrically British, but it's a sort of image of Britain that people like to look at. Now, although there is all this heritage content in this film and in other films, I am not trying to say that they are bad films which only succeed because of the beautiful old buildings and furniture. Sometimes, a fair amount of the time, they are also good stories which bring up interesting questions and so on. The Chariots of Fire, among other things, brings up the question of anti-Semitism in Britain in the 1930s. That's not the main theme, but that comes in there. And the Cambridge student who is Jewish is not treated in the same way. So it brings up interesting questions, but you're always also left with this question, you know, why do people go and see it? And people don't necessarily go and see your film for the reasons you wanted them to go and see your film. And it may be that this image of glorious past empire, tradition, riches, and sophistication may be an important part of the attraction of the film. I have another example here, which in fact is a little bit exceptional, because this is a 1982 film on Gandhi. So it's a very surprising film in some ways for the time. This is the first major film where a British film producer looks directly at the British Empire and how horrible it was, and the terrible, terrible ways in which the Indians were treated by their British rulers. It may not be the first one, but it's the first massive blockbuster film which does that. And so, of course, people go to see this because of the inspiring politics of Mahatma Gandhi, although no doubt this could be accused of being somewhat hagiographic. There are things one could criticize Gandhi for which are not mentioned in the film, which is fair play, really. They're allowed to do that. However, although in a way this is a radical film about fighting imperialism, it's also chock full of images of beautiful British India and the gentlemen with their servants, and the viewer is allowed to dream about what it must have been like to be superior and to have servants. And so again, the reason that the producer would like you to come and see the film may not be the reason people do come and see the film. No, I haven't studied this in detail, but these are the questions we want to look at. Now, Gandhi is exceptionally radical for a heritage film. There are many, many more. A Passage to India is a fairly classic example, though again, it's a matter of British India, and you're going to see large numbers of Indian servants, probably happy Indian servants. This is the sort of film it is. Another one there, Carrington. So here, this is a slightly different touch on it, a slightly different take on it, in that this is about a painter. And so it's about a painter. So, but you can see, you're going to see traditional, really English landscapes and really English situations and really English characters. We know because Emma Thompson is in it. And so again, it's presenting a particular side of Britain. There's another one, the 94, The Madness of King George. Again, there is a real story in here, which is an interesting story where King George certainly did lose control was no longer able to rule because he was somewhere else from a mental health point of view. And so it does have an interesting historical story to tell, but I am fairly sure that when at the beginning they went to see the investors, they said, oh yes, there'll be lots of palaces and lots of servants and beautiful costumes and aristocrats and royal protocol, and investors know this sells at the cinema, and so this is part of what heritage cinema is all about. Here, a more recent one, interesting example, this one, because this is based on a British novel by how do you pronounce his name? Ishiguro. Yeah, so this is somebody whose family came from somewhere else at some point. I can't even remember where. Who wrote this story, The Remains of the Day, which is about the butler and the housekeeper in a great house, a great house, a great bourgeois house in the 1930s. And there's a subplot which is political, and the political subplot is about the head of the house, the bourgeois who is head of the house, actually being rather sympathetic to the Nazis, which was not unusual among the elite in the 30s, and having meetings there to discuss, what could be done to make sure that Britain did not have a war with Nazi Germany. So there's an interesting political plot there, and there's the sort of para-romance between these two, who obviously feel very strongly one about the other, but who are locked by their roles as polite butler and polite housekeeper to have great difficulty expressing any priority except the one of making sure that the master's house works smoothly. So it may be that Ishiguro and the film producer are looking at how people's personalities were destroyed by being servants, even though they were prestigious servants, the butler and the housekeeper. It wasn't the maid. It may be, but is that why people come to see it? Of course, people come to see films for multiple reasons at the same time. That's but certainly the view of the beautiful crockery and the costumes and the attitude and the very, very restrained emotion is all about, let me show you typical Britain, whatever that is. So it was certainly a very interesting film. It translates into French as Les Vestiges du Jour, and Anthony Hopkins. So very, very high quality acting and so on. Another turn, or another category within the heritage film is the heritage literature film. Now, this is almost always based on Jane Austen, but it can be based on films by Charlotte Bronte and a couple of other, so very often female novelists from the 18th, 19th centuries, who are going to present this world, well, in this case it's the 18th century, who are going to present these worlds where expressing emotion is extremely difficult, where people are extremely skilled at using words, where there are beautiful furniture, beautiful landscapes and so on, and so terribly typically English, I am told. Also, they do tend to have a sort of the films tend to have a sort of feminist slant. Now, it's true that, in Jane Austen's novels, the women are strong women, despite the general situation that women are not allowed a space in public life and can only be influential in private and family life. And of course, they all fall in love and they live happily ever after. Yes, very often the heroine is from a very bourgeois family, but who have lost their money. That's very favorite situation to describe on film. So this is another subcategory of the literary heritage film. Within the royal heritage films, there have been some interesting variations. So what is common here is the proposal to show the grandeur of royal life and royal protocol and royal buildings and so on. And I'm sure that helps very much to get the funding. But also these are often very skilled film directors, and certainly Stephen Frears produced this film, The Queen, in 2006, which was very, very original. Despite the fact that it was a heritage film, it was very, very original because, first of all, normally when you make a film about a queen or a king, you wait till they're dead. And then you can only say good things about them, for example. But this was actually about the situation in 97. Is it 97 or 90? Oh, I get all confused. 97. In 97, when Princess Diana was driven around Paris too fast by a drunken driver and got killed. And how this played out in Britain, more particularly how it played out within the royal family, and in their public relations, how the public saw the reaction of the Queen, and how the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, tried to manage the situation so that both the Queen and himself would come out with a good reputation. So, in my opinion, an extremely good film, nevertheless a heritage film that you only need to see the word Queen, and there's several million people around the world, when they see, it's a film that's called The Queen, I'll go and see it, because there's something about this mystique of British elite. A similar one, which I think a lot of people saw when I asked people in class if they saw it, they often have, The King's Speech, where again, you have something completely new in here. This is a king, but who has a problem. So he's not all powerful or perfect or anything. He has a problem. He has a stutter. And the Australian, what's the word? The Australian speech therapist who secretly helps him to give the speeches which will help to win the war, or something like that. Yes. And so again, you're promised all the royal protocol, and you're promised a secret visit where you will be able to watch what the Queen, what the royals were really like. Were really like. So you're getting a special invitation as the viewer to come to a world where normally you're not allowed to enter, but today you are. And this is what the heritage film does for you. Oh. The last example I wanted to mention is Downton Abbey. Now, Downton Abbey, so obviously a very modern example, 2019. And a rather specific example, well, first of all, from the point of view of funding, because the investors in Downton Abbey were not very worried, not very stressed. The series had already been massively popular, and so the film was going to be a success. It was not. They were not risking their money very much. But it is a tremendously interesting film and series in that it shows the life of the bourgeoisie, but also the life of their servants. And this is partly, this is very interesting, that it's no longer easy for films or indeed television series to show only the life of the bourgeois and the rich, because there has been a rise in the democratic spirit. There has been a rise in the expectation that ordinary people will be taken seriously. And also, quite often, there has been a certain rise in the expectation that women and non-white people will be taken seriously. And so it's no longer so easy to make films where only the rich white men appear. Nevertheless, in Downton Abbey, we're going to be shown probably about half the time is talking about the bourgeois, and almost half the time talking about their servants. And this feels like it's kind of balanced. So, of course, not really, because there have always been innumerably more servants than there are bourgeois, but also it's a very particular part of the dominated classes which is shown in Downton Abbey. They don't show factory workers who might go on strike. Yeah? They don't show workers in a situation where their collective strength and their collective action can change something. They show the dominated workers within Downton Abbey, which belongs very clearly to the bourgeoisie. It's not everybody's house. They are allowed a little bit in the basement to live in. So it's very clearly, although it's demonstrates this certain democratic spirit, it seems to me that it's still fairly clearly a conservative view of Britain. Of course, people are supposed to imagine it as typical. Of course, it was not typical. Most servants lived in much smaller houses than that, in places which had 3 or 4 servants and so on. So to finish talking about the heritage film, what have I been saying about this? Well, for the international markets, these films are part of a projection of an image of Britain as a sort of theme park of the past. And certainly when they try to sell holidays in Britain, well, they can't really sell holidays in Britain based on the sun and the sea and the sand, because it rains all the time. And so they do try to sell Britain as a place where real history will be there for you. Real history, that is to say, aristocratic and bourgeois history. At the same time, these films probably try to reassure part of the British public about certain aspects of their culture. So just to sum up, the heritage content attracts a lot of viewers and therefore attracts a lot of investors. And this is very important. And it may be that the heritage content is an important part of the message, even though the producers may prefer to think of the radical message they put in Gandhi, the psychological message they put in the King's Speech, the romantic message they put in Pride and Prejudice. Who's to know why people are going and why people are buying a ticket? Okay, well, that's almost half an hour, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to talk in future chapters about 2 other genres: British comedy, humor, and British social films, films about ordinary people and their problems, because it seems that these 3 categories are important for British cinema. They manage to keep British cinema alive and visible around the world. Now, there are many British films which do not fit into these categories, but I think that by studying these 3 categories, we will find out something both about British cinema and about cinema in general as a very specific type of popular culture, because it's certainly popular. You know, millions of people go to see it and feel it is for them. If you look at opera and theatre, even though people may go sometimes, very often they don't feel it's for them. They feel that, oh, well, no, the theatre, well, that's for posh people, isn't it? The opera, I wouldn't know where to put myself. Yeah. Whereas cinema has certainly broken through that. I don't think there are many people around. You know, people may not be able to afford to go to the cinema, but there are not many people around us. Oh, well, no, I'm not the sort of person to go to the cinema. I wouldn't know how to dress. Yeah, so there aren't those social barriers. So on one side, it's genuinely popular culture. And on the other hand, because you need millions of pounds, or certainly hundreds of thousands of pounds to make a film, it has to be very constrained as popular culture. And in particular, in cinema, the American market is absolutely key. When British producers make a film, they're already thinking, how can I make sure that it sells reasonably in America? Because that's what will make the money to keep the investors happy, which means that they'll help me make my next film. Now, of course, it's a tremendous advantage to the British to be able to make films in English, because that means that selling them in America, India, Australia, and other places, it's very easy, that they can really use the star actors they have, because a star actor is a little less impressive if they're dubbed. Now, of course, subtitled films are on the rise over the last 20 years, so that's not as true as it used to be. But certainly, the British cinema being made in English is a tremendous advantage on the international market, and probably one of the reasons that Britain has survived quite well for a small country in the international cinema market today. Thank you for listening. That's all for the moment. All I have to do is find the button I need to press there. I did a partager. And if I press this button, you will all disappear, or I will, somebody will.